In the midst of the Israel-Hamas conflict, Korea's KCNA news agency releases a statement. This statement, like an arrow shot from the east, pierces the global discourse surrounding the Middle East crisis. It reads, "It is nothing but a bid to shift the blame for the Middle East crisis caused by the United States, wrong hegemonic policy onto a third country, and thus evade the international criticism focused on the empire of evil." This quote, emanating from the heart of Korea, is shrouded in a fog of political implications and layered meanings. It suggests a game of deflection, a tale of blame shifting, and a critique of what the KCNA news agency refers to as the wrong hegemonic policy of the United States. The statement also alludes to an empire of evil, a term that has been historically used to denote states perceived as threats to global peace. Who this empire refers to in the context of the Israel-Hamas conflict, however, is a puzzle that we need to solve. This statement, charged with harsh criticism, warrants a deep dive into its meaning and implications. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So buckle up as we venture into the labyrinth of geopolitical rhetoric. Let's break this quote down piece by piece. We start with the term wrong hegemonic policy. Hegemony refers to the domination or leadership of one state or group over others. In this context, it's a reference to the United States foreign policy, which is often seen by critics as an attempt to assert its influence and control over other nations. The wrong part here is a critique, suggesting that this policy has led to problems, in this case, the Middle East crisis. Next, we have shift the blame. This implies an attempt to redirect the responsibility for a problem onto someone else. It's a classic move in politics, and in this context, it's accusing the United States of trying to offload the blame for the Middle East crisis onto a third country, which is the next term we'll look at. A third country is a term often used in international relations to denote a country not directly involved in a bilateral relationship or conflict. In this instance, the quote suggests that the United States is attempting to pin the blame for the Middle East crisis onto another nation not directly involved, and finally, the empire of evil. This phrase is a loaded one, often used as a polemic or rhetorical device. It's a strong condemnation, used here to criticize and condemn the United States. It paints the U.S. as a malevolent force, suggesting that its actions and policies are not just wrong, but actively harmful. Understanding these terms gives us a clearer picture of KCNA's stance. The quote heavily implies a game of shifting blame, but who are the players? It's a question that beckons us to dive into the murky waters of international politics, where the game of shifting blame is as old as the concept of nation-states themselves. The Middle East crisis, a complex tapestry woven from threads of historical conflicts, geopolitical interests, and cultural clashes, often serves as the backdrop for this blame game. The players, they are the nations, the powers that be, who maneuver in this global chessboard, each trying to advance their pawns while keeping their kings safe. The empire of evil, as the quote refers to, is a term often used to paint the United States in a negative light. Why? Because of its role as a global superpower, its involvement in the Middle East, and its policies that are often seen as hegemonic. The United States' influence in the Middle East, both direct and indirect, has been a subject of intense debate and criticism. And here, in the quote, it is being blamed for the crisis. Then there's the third country, a player seemingly dragged into the blame game. The quote does not specify this country, but in the context of the Israel-Hamas conflict, it could potentially refer to Israel, Hamas, or any other state involved in the Middle East crisis. The mention of a third country implies that the blame is being shifted away from the U.S. and onto this unnamed player. The blame game, in essence, is a strategy. It's a way for countries to deflect criticism, manage their international image, and navigate the treacherous waters of geopolitics. It's a game of finger-pointing, of saying, it's not us, it's them. But as we delve deeper, we see that this game is not just about assigning blame, it's about power, it's about influence. And most importantly, it's about responsibility. Because while shifting blame might be a short-term strategy, taking responsibility and working towards solutions is the long-term game. This blame game is an intricate dance of power, influence, and responsibility. And as we move forward, it's crucial to understand the players, the moves, and the stakes involved. Because in the end, it's not just a game, it's the reality of our world. At the heart of the quote is the critique of a wrong hegemonic policy. So what is a hegemonic policy? In the world of international relations, hegemony refers to the dominance of one country or group over others. It's a kind of influence, a power that's not just about military might, but also about shaping the norms, rules, and systems that govern international interactions. When we speak of a hegemonic policy, we're talking about a deliberate strategy to maintain and expand this dominance. It's about the assertion of control, the shaping of global affairs according to one's own interests and ideologies. But why does the Korean Central News Agency, or KCNA, label this policy as wrong? The answer lies in the context. The hegemonic policy they're referring to is that of the United States. From their perspective, the U.S. uses its power not to promote peace and stability, but to provoke conflict and unrest. In the case of the Middle East crisis, they argue that the U.S. has exploited its influence to shift the blame onto a third party, thus evading international criticism. Instead of taking responsibility for the impact of its actions, the U.S. allegedly manipulates the narrative, positioning itself as the righteous protector, rather than a potential instigator. This critique isn't unique to KCNA. Critics of hegemony often point out that it allows the powerful to shape the world in their image, often at the expense of the less powerful. It's a system that can perpetuate inequality, sow discord, and stifle voices of dissent. But it's not all black and white. Proponents argue that a hegemon can provide stability, set standards, and act as a global police force. It's a complex, multifaceted issue, and one that lies at the heart of many international debates. Hegemony is a delicate balance, and any misstep can lead to a cascade of consequences. And so, the debate continues. KCNA's perspective offers a unique lens to view the conflict. The Korean Central News Agency, or KCNA, is North Korea's state-run news agency. It's the key source of information from the secretive nation, and its commentaries often provide insight into the country's stance on global events. In the Israel-Hamas conflict, the KCNA's coverage and commentary are particularly noteworthy. The agency's statement we're discussing today is a clear reflection of North Korea's political positioning and its view of global power dynamics. When they label the United States as the empire of evil, they're not just hurling insults, they're expressing a deep-seated belief about the role of the U.S. in the world. North Korea has long been critical of U.S. foreign policy, often viewing it through a lens of imperialism and hegemony. In the eyes of the KCNA, the U.S. is an external force imposing its will on other nations. This perspective shapes their interpretation of the Israel-Hamas conflict. They see it as a byproduct of U.S. interventionism, and they're not afraid to voice this opinion to the world. But it's not just about the U.S. The KCNA's commentary also shows how North Korea positions itself in relation to the rest of the world. By criticizing the U.S., they're asserting their own independence and sovereignty. They're positioning themselves as an alternative to the U.S.-led world order. And they're using the Israel-Hamas conflict as a platform to express this stance. So, when we look at the Israel-Hamas conflict through the lens of the KCNA, we're not just seeing a conflict between two parties in the Middle East. We're seeing a larger narrative about global power dynamics, about hegemony and independence, about blame and responsibility. We're seeing a perspective that challenges the prevailing narratives and forces us to think critically about the roles different countries play in global conflicts. In conclusion, the KCNA's commentary on the Israel-Hamas conflict is more than just a statement. It's a reflection of North Korea's worldview, and it offers a unique perspective on the global stage. Every viewpoint adds another layer to the multifaceted reality of international politics. So, what does this all mean and why does it matter? Let's summarize. The quote from Korea's KCNA news agency is a critique of the United States' hegemonic policy, suggesting it's to blame for the Middle East crisis, specifically the Israel-Hamas conflict. The agency asserts that the U.S. is using a third party as a scapegoat to evade international criticism, referring to it as the empire of evil. This perspective adds another layer to understanding the Israel-Hamas conflict. It emphasizes the role of external forces and their policies in influencing regional dynamics. In essence, it's a call to look beyond the immediate players and examine the larger geopolitical chessboard. This analysis underscores the importance of diverse viewpoints in interpreting global events. No single narrative can fully encapsulate the complexity of international politics. Therefore, it is through the amalgamation of these different perspectives that we can hope to gain a more comprehensive understanding of the world. As we delve deeper into the intricacies of international politics, it's crucial to remember that every voice, every perspective, adds to the complex tapestry of global understanding.